Desert Healthcare District and Foundation presents a podcast that supports your health and wellness where you live. This is Healthy Desert, Healthy You, hosted by Will Dean. Now, here's Will.
Hello, friends. I am here today with Cecilia Lemus, who is a program coordinator with the Youth Leadership Institute, which is a grantee of the Desert Healthcare District. About a year ago, we launched a request for proposals process, and that had to do with air mitigation. And a number of local organizations reached out to us with their ideas and their programs. And one of those organizations that we funded was the Youth Leadership Institute. So welcome, Cecilia.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I know we've been in the works of planning this. So
we've been going back and forth a little bit, but it's finally happening.
Yeah, it's cool that we get to do it right now today at the summit.
Yeah. So tell me about this grant and what the Youth Leadership Institute is doing with it.
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about a Youth Leadership Institute. So we are a statewide nonprofit. We have different offices across the state of California, and we have two in Southern California. We're one of them in the Eastern Coachella Valley. The other one is in Long Beach. And so it's really important to have these types of programs and resources for youth in the Eastern Coachella Valley because there are a lot of limited resources for young people, especially where they can have third spaces to be around other young folks and to do leadership work or to do artwork. And so I specifically help coordinate Coachella Incorporated, and that program focuses on issues of environmental justice, whether it's water, infrastructure, but obviously right now our focus is air quality because of this grant. And YLI, really, our mission is to make sure that we are strong adult allies to young people and that young people can lead the work, lead the conversation that either focuses on storytelling or even policy change. So it really ranges from conversations to it can go all the way to attending city council meetings and stuff. But I will say right now, in the ECV, our main focus has been storytelling, getting stories out there that are not usually in the media.
Right. So when we talk about young people, is there an age range or a grade level?
Yeah. So our focus is youth ages 14 through 25. Majority of the young people are from the unincorporated communities in the ECV. They either go to CV High School, Coachella Valley High School, Desert Mirage High School. Some of them are not in school too. Maybe they're just working, or some of them attend community college, the local Cal States. So it's not really if you're a student, it's your age range that we focus on. And as long as you have some type of interest or connection within current issues happening in the Eastern Coachella Valley, then you're welcomed in the space.
Okay. What I really love that you said earlier is that you talked about young people leading. And I think a lot of times we don't think about that as far as environmental challenges, whether it's air mitigation or water quality. The younger generation, they're the ones who are going to inherit these issues.
Yeah.
So they need to be aware and they need to be involved.
Yeah.
When you talk to them, are they already aware of the issues? They are?
Yeah.
What kinds of things do they talk about or do they say?
Because the Eastern Coachella Valley has such a long and rich history of advocacy, whether it's through the farm worker movement or even because of the proximity to the Salton Sea, because it's an agricultural rural area. The folks who live there, whether they're immigrants or they've been living there for generations, they're just from their everyday experiences. They know what's going on. And then what's really cool to see is that a lot of elders too, because that rich history has been passed on, it gets talked about too, whether in schools or amongst their peers or older folks who just tell the history and stuff. But yeah, just I can share, right, that in our programming, we have weekly meetings. And the conversations come up, they can tell right away the differences between growing up in the Eastern Coachella Valley versus other school districts or just living environments on the west side of the valley.
Right.
They can see the differences. And also proximity to Salton Sea, you can smell the Salton Sea. They just know, and it comes up in everyday conversations. They're very aware of what's happening.
Are they very optimistic that they can actually make a change? Because sometimes, even for adults, when we hear climate change, it's such a big term that it can be overwhelming. It can be intimidating.
Yeah.
Well, when the young people through YLI, when they learn about these challenges, are they ready to take them on?
So that's a really good question because actually in the data that we've been doing through this air quality grant, there were different themes that came up. And one of them was actually the sense of like hopelessness almost. And I don't want to say that's everyone's perspective, but it did come up, right? I think one of the questions was, how do you see your community in 10 years from now? And a lot of them said, sometimes I feel like people don't care, or I think it's going to get worse. And so I think that it's also because of like how you said, they're inheriting all of this the climate change. They're being born into this time that, I don't know, it could just feel like it feels so far along for them maybe. And then also something that's very interesting is because mental health is talked about so much, it's not so much of a taboo for them anymore as much as it was for like older generations to talk about mental health. But sometimes I feel like it's talked about too much that they're okay, like again, mental health, another like mental health workshop. So for us, that kind of just reminds us like, okay, what can we do to make this a safe space? What can we do to make this a space where folks can show up authentically? And so it's so simple. Like we just have to remind ourselves that at the end of the day, like I said, should be a safe third space for them to just be able to be themselves, just be able to show up. And when you take away the pressures of, oh my gosh, we have to talk about this air pollution. We have to talk about this policy that could save the Salton Sea and all this stuff. When you take away that pressure and you're just creating activities and you're creating an environment where people can show up and they feel like they can be themselves, the work or those conversations will naturally come up. And so I think that when you feel like you're in community with people, you get that sense of hope.
Right.
And so that's something that we're always like, okay, if we feel like things are getting a little bit too pessimistic in the group, we're like, okay, we need to stop. We need to just go back to our roots and just have an art workshop. We need to have a photography workshop. We need to do a field trip. We need to go on a hike and just be like around each other and to get that sense of community back in the space.
Right.
Because ultimately that's what's going to push us forward. And to also have those conversations it gives you hope where you rooted in. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense because it can become really dangerous if you think you are alone dealing with any issue, especially environmental challenges.
Or it's up to you. All of the weight is on your shoulders. Yeah.
And at the 2025 Healthy Desert, Healthy Youth Summit, we did hear Andrea Vidari talk about the importance of community.
Yeah. One of the reflection points. Yeah.
Excellent. I know you mentioned earlier that YLI is, I forgot how you phrased it, but it's an adult guidance or alliance for these young people. Mm-hmm. Is there any peer-to-peer activities going on as well or no?
Yeah, the conversations that are held, like any reflection questions that we pose to the group, we make sure everyone has a chance to share what their thoughts are. And then we also don't push, you have to share. Sometimes folks just want to be there and listen.
Right.
And if they get inspired to share, then that's cool. If they don't, then, that's also okay. But yeah, I think being around people your age who are either you go to the same school or you've just seen each other, maybe you're meeting each other for the first time, but just being around each other, it's really nice to have that sense of community. And so I think that's like our peer-to-peer.
Right.
Yeah. And then us, like the adult allies there.
Right. I love that. Anything else that you want our listeners to know about YLI or about this particular grant and programming?
Yeah, I can share that we have a timeline for our grant, right? We started off with YPAR, which stands for Youth Participatory Action Research. So young people conducted a survey and interviews, qualitative interviews with their peers, family members, teachers, anybody in their community who could share their experiences or testimonies on air pollution in the Eastern Coachella Valley. And from that data, we are creating a zine and a public service announcement. And all of that is pretty much like the early foundations, the early steps to creating a campaign on air quality to bring about awareness, one that for folks to know that the air pollution is really bad. And we're under AB 617, which addresses that. So it's been acknowledged by like the government. And a lot of people don't know about AB 617. And so bringing about awareness and then also finding ways to collaborate with other people in order for everyone to share their resources on how to protect yourself on air, the risks of air pollution, whether it's like the filtration program that exists. So any resident in the Eastern Coachella Valley can order a free air purifier for their home. And like some of our partners like Visión y Compromiso, DAP, they're creating referral systems for people who are experiencing symptoms of air pollution. So like symptoms as mild as like allergies to like having a constant cough, asthma, different symptoms that they could be experiencing, and making sure they get that proper care.
I so appreciate the work that you're doing, the work that YLI is doing. So thank you so much for that.
No, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Healthy Desert, Healthy You. This podcast is a production of the Desert Healthcare District and Foundation in Palm Springs, California. For more information, please visit the website dhcd.org. Our annual conference site is healthydesert.healthyu.com. This podcast is available at most major podcast portals, including Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Audible, Captivate.fm, Spotify, and YouTube Music. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe.